Well, this is the beginning of Unit 6, which we're going to call Flash in Some Style. And our subtitle is Advanced Grammar Structures. And I know you're thinking like we've been doing advanced grammar structures this whole time, but this is truly advanced grammar structures. It's a sad day because this is our last unit in learning diagramming. This is the pinnacle, man. We're going to get to the most advanced grammatical structures we have in English language, some things that some people don't even know exist, and really start flashing our grammar style as writers. So that's kind of fun stuff. So we're going to start off with some easy things and kind of build into some more challenging things. So today's video, we're going to take a look at what we call simple sentence modifiers. And it sounds amazing. So here we go. So following along on your worksheet, so simple sentence modifiers. We're going to take these two sentences we have in front of us. First one says, President Biden did not explain the severity of the situation clearly. And the second sentence says, clearly, President Biden did not explain the severity of the situation. So I know these two sentences are not on your worksheet, so just kind of follow along with me, maybe write them down if you'd like to, or you just kind of listen and see if you can kind of gather what I'm going to kind of pull from this. This is a concept we took on at the in chapter or in unit 4 rather, when we talk about adverbs. And so I want to draw your attention to these two adverbs, the word clearly. And we talked about this before, that sometimes an adverb will take a comma, and most times the adverb won't take a comma. So we were focusing really on these adverbs which don't take commas. And now we're going to kind of take a look at the adverbs that do take commas and really, once again, why they do. So let's take a look at these two. So this first one is a traditional adverb, what we'd call a manner adverb. Manner adverbs typically end in ly because basically they make a comment about how something is being done. In this case, particularly, it's the manner in which President Biden did something. So he did not explain the severity of the situation in a very clear manner. So imagine that he went up to the podium and he fumbled his words, he mumbled, he just did not do a very good job of explaining clearly to the rest of us, like what's going on in whatever situation we're talking about. Now, the second example, if I said clearly, comma, President Biden did not explain the severity of the situation, the comma makes this what we call a sentence modifier. So this is the first concept we have in this unit. A sentence modifier basically indicates the attitude of the writer towards the message that's stated in the clause. So the fact of the sentence does not change. The President Biden did not explain the severity of the situation. But the sentence modifier kind of gives a little bit of an attitude. As we mentioned this before, back once again in Unit 4, it kind of modifies not just simply one word, but it kind of modifies the entire sentence. And that's why we call it a sentence modifier. In this particular sentence, you imagine that President Biden went up to the podium and he explained the situation and tried to explain how severe it was, but he just didn't necessarily explain how really severe it was. And so therefore we're saying clearly he didn't explain the severity of the situation. Maybe he kind of downplayed it a little bit. And so therefore we have sort of like this attitude of the writer when we put a comma after that adverb. So when we come across these, and as writers, we have to ask ourselves, wait a minute, do I put a comma in or not? Because some adverbs are pretty clear whether they're going to get commas or not. But some of these adverbs kind of do both ways. And so it depends on what you mean, and that comma changes the meaning. So the question is, wait a minute, is it an adverb or is it a sentence modifier? So if it's an adverb, try moving it. So if I move it around, it should move around naturally and sometimes even closer to the verb, and it makes a lot of sense. President Biden did not clearly explain the severity of the situation. When you try moving a sentence modifier, it can't be moved without the commas traveling with it. And you do that because you can always hit that word harder than all the other words. President Biden did not clearly explain the severity of the situation. You can almost hear you have like a little bit of an attitude about it when you say the word clearly. And so those commas seem to kind of travel with it as a way of really hitting that word harder than all the rest. That may not always help some people understand which one is which. So another technique I like to use, sorry about that, you can also move it to the end. Once again, no matter where you put it, the comma is still going to travel with it. Apologize. All right, so another method that I like to use is a substitution. So think about another way of saying the word clearly and seeing if that same meaning makes sense and whether you punctuate it or not with commas. So here's what I mean. Clearly could also mean like obviously. So if I said the word obviously, if I said the first sentence, President Biden did not explain the severity of the situation obviously. Well, I don't think that makes a lot of sense to read it that way. But what if I read it as obviously, President Biden did not explain the severity of the situation? Well, that one has a little bit more attitude. And you're like, okay, That second one definitely has attitude. That's the kind of clearly that means obviously. I'm going to put a comma with him. That first one didn't make sense to say the word obviously the way I was reading the sentence. Therefore, I wouldn't have put a comma with that one. Let me give you another example. What if I said the word very well? Because clearly could mean very well. If I said President Biden did not explain the severity of the situation very well. Well, if I use the word very well, I wouldn't put a comma there. And that's why I wouldn't put a comma with that form of clearly. But if I said very well, President Biden did not explain the severity of the situation, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And that's the reason why the word very well doesn't make sense there. I'm like, okay, that's not the same meaning. So in a sense, what I'm saying is if you mean very well, as in clearly, very well, that means I wouldn't necessarily put a comma in that one because that doesn't make sense. But if I mean the word obviously or clearly, that seems like it would take a comma because I'm making a comment about the whole sentence. So sometimes substitution words can also help. So that one's the adverb. That one is the sentence modifier. That can be confusing. I guess even saying this, we start off with some early easy stuff in this unit. Maybe that's a little confusing for some people. So let's take a look at a basic diagram of a sentence modifier. So the first example we have on your worksheet says, luckily, Mr. Achille didn't look closely at our homework because Ian's was actually a takeout menu from number one Chinese. Well, the word luckily is one of those words where it's kind of saying fortunately or luckily this whole thing happened. And so therefore, this case, this sentence modifier is an adverb, but he's actually a sentence modifier. He's an adverb in the form of a sentence modifier. And that's why he's going to get a comma. I'm going to change screens and see if I can diagram this one with you. So let's go down here. It's been a long time since I've done any kind of diagramming live on a video. So here we go. So I'm going to start off with my main sentence. I'm going to ignore this word luckily. I'm just going to diagram my main sentence. I also notice I have this adverb clause. Starts off with the word because on this back half. Because Ian's was actually a takeout menu from number one Chinese. So that's my adverb clause. I'm going to change my color. So I'm going to make my main clause here, which is Mr. Achille didn't look closely at our homework. So I'm going to build my main clause here. So here's Mr. Achille. And my verb is did look. We know to drop that word not underneath. So here's did look. And then here's not. And then he did not look how closely. Here's a little adverb. And then he did not look at homework. I guess you could say closely at our homework, and you could connect those two. I wouldn't fault you for it. Here's our homework. I have a cup of coffee beside me, and I've not had a chance to drink it, so I'm afraid it's going to get cold here soon. All right, so let's do our second clause here, which is our adverb clause. And it says, because Ian's was actually a takeout. So that's a little peculiar. It's something we're actually going to take on right after this first worksheet we're doing. But let's focus on what we have in front of us, Jeffrey, one thing at a time. So I can see this verb as was. There's a reason I'm going to skip this subject. And then I have it was menu. It was a menu. Takeout is a lovely little noun. So let's flatten that as a noun serving as an adjective. So here's takeout. It's a takeout menu, and it's a menu from, I'm going to call number one Chinese to be the full name of the restaurant. It is close to my house. And I don't know if it's actually the number one Chinese restaurant I've ever been to, but it's cheap and I love it. So there you go. I'm going to put the word actually underneath that verb here. And then I'm looking for my subject. Well, Ian's with apostrophe S can't be my subject. And so my subject is actually homework, but I don't have the word homework. It's kind of understood, isn't it? So I'm just going to leave it blank, or I'm going to put an X here to let me know that it's the word homework. But I'm missing a word. I'm going to say it's Ian's. We're going to do something different. Well, not really necessarily different, but we're going to explain this a little bit more in a couple videos from now, but just trust me that the word homework is trying to sit right here. It's Ian's homework was actually a takeout menu from number one Chinese. Now, this is an old school adverb clause, so I don't think about connecting homework to that X. That's not what's happening here. It's an adverb clause. That word because is going to go from verb to verb, and here's that word because sitting right here. I love that. All right. Everything's looking great. The one thing we have not done yet, I'm going to highlight them over here. That is not what I meant to highlight. I thought it was going to be like more of a color. Okay, we'll just go with it. So luckily, we've not taken care of the word luckily yet. I'm going to change my color for luckily. I'm going to make him a, what is that fun looking pine green. So the word luckily is my sentence modifier. And here's the major takeaway. So normally an adverb like closely would go underneath the verb. An adverb like actually would go underneath the verb. The adverb should probably connect to something that's modifying. But the word luckily is actually modifying this entire sentence. And so therefore, it would be unfair for me to connect the word luckily to one single word, because that would make the word luckily only modifying that one single word. And it's not. It's actually modifying this entire sentence, both the main clause and the adverb clause sitting over here. And for that reason, I don't want to connect it to anything. So one of the early things we're going to find in this unit is we're going to have a lot of structures that float, that don't connect to anything. So the word luckily gets to float. I typically float him over here, and I'm going to put him right here. Here's luckily. Now, that's going to be my first attempt at this. I'm going to do something different for my second video, but you get the gist. This is going to be called my sentence modifier. Kapow. All right. I'm going to pause my video, restart, and take a little drink of coffee, and then do a second one with you. That's not what I wanted. Where is my video?